Доброго дня, шановні колеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, signed the laws on the ratification of bilateral agreements with Australia on dispatchment of Ukrainian Australian personnel to investigate circumstances of the crash of MH17, and also a similar agreement with the Netherlands. According to the agreement, Australia can dispatch police, military and civilian personnel and the related assets. They will have freedom of movement in the territory of Ukraine to reach out to the locations that are related to investigation of the crash. In the agreement with the Netherlands, it is stipulated that the Netherlands will be at the helm of the mission. Under Resolution 2166 of the Security Council UN of the 21st of July this year, and also for the purpose of conduct of other activities as agreed between the parties. Military and civilian personnel from Australia and the Netherlands will join the mission, and in some cases citizens of the nations that were had their national on the board. They can use weapons for self-defense and execute activities under the agreement. Personnel of the mission will wear field uniform. The number of personnel is more than 700 armed people. Units of ATO have fully liberated Новый Свет of Donetsk Oblast and also raised the national flag at the top of the central building. They started reconstruction of the infrastructure and utilities. ATO forces continue the operations along the border of Ukraine with Russia. Certain units deployed at the Dovzhansky, Zvarany, and Chervono partisans were under constant fire and shelling of the artillery, also from Graz. Now they were removed to the safe positions. And over last day, checkpoints and positions of units of the armed forces of Ukraine were shot at Shakhtarsk, Vesela Tarasivka, Білоріченський, Контарне, Дебальцеве, Стукалова Балка, Макарове, Григорівка, Дякове, and airfield of Luhansk. Some part of fire was shot from the territory of the Russian Federation. From the direction of Ratikhovat in the Russian Federation, from Grad, the shelling was done at the checkpoint of the Ukrainian forces not far from Grigorivka. Around 2200 from the Metakinsky community in the Russian Federation, 8 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border, sheltered positions at Nova Vilkovka and Makarev. 50 shots from the mortars, and from our checkpoint at Grigorivka was shelled from the territory of the Russian Federation. 150 terrorists at the same time attacked Ukrainian military officers with support of 3 tanks, but their offense was overturned and they had to retreat in the area of Caesar village. Battalion of Territorial Defense Chernihiv identified and destroyed an ambush of terrorists. Over last day, aviation of the Russian Federation on several occasions illicitly crossed the Ukrainian border, going as deep as 10 to 15 kilometers. The ATO forces register such violations visually and with radio location direction, finding 4 helicopters of fire support K-52 from the Russian Federation. Did it yesterday with the means of air defense. 3 crafts were identified moving at 800 kilometers speed at very low heights, and they come to the Russian Federation at big altitude from Studena and Peshchansky Rayon of Vinnytsky Oblasti. For the third time over a recent period, there were drones flying around coming from Transnistria and the Ukrainian-Moldovan state border. The Russian party are actively preparing fire positions for shelling of the Ukrainian territory. Yesterday at Stratovbryansk Oblast, that's 5 kilometers away from the Russian, from the Ukrainian border, in front of Chernihiv Oblast, in the woods, 17 units of grad were accommodated and across the border in front of Sumy detachment, 15 kilometers away from the border. 3 personal carriers with a caliber of 152 millimeters were displayed, and we registered movement in Donetsk, Rostov Oblast. The 200 infantry brigade arrived from Murmansk Oblast. Seversky Donetsk River from the territory of the Russian Federation at Popovka and Veliky Sukhodiv, Luhansk Oblast. Russians with pontoons, with the ferries, got some machinery across for the terrorists from Chechen. Republic of the Kadyrov soldiers echelon was dispatched with armor and the fighters. And we can see the topic of violations and breach in the social media. False information is disseminated on allegedly forceful and premature deployment of inexperienced rookies in the ATO area. This is false information. I would like to emphasize that this is a well-planned disinformation campaign designed by the Russian special services. We have a very rich reserve, I would like to emphasize, for mobilization resources, and we have no need in any forceful deployment of any people. There are too many volunteers willing to join, but they're in active reserve currently. Now about the situation in the conflict area. Terrorists still install mines. 2 more bridges joined in Donetsk and also Kharkiv, Shakhtarsk, Lysenko village, Volnovakha district, Rebrikovo, Anthracit district, and Pridorozhny, Ambrosivka region district. At Zuyevka, Shakhtarsk district, terrorists mined local water supply facility Lhivsky, and the shelling is ongoing for the residential areas. You can hear the conversation of terrorists. Guys, we had another shelling of Kramatorsk. What I would like to tell you, whatever people say, the Ukrainian army, they are shooting now, and I witness how from the heights they were shooting at the urban area, and then they turned it around and started shooting at the Ukrainian soldiers. Whoever says anything that there's military people, and there were terrorists shooting. I glory be to Donbass, but I personally saw people. Look, it's in my profile, my car, it's signed, it's Zhiguli, with the pictures pasted there when they were bombarding the Tankostroy, and more than 20 pictures, a score of pictures you can see if you want. They're all posted there. I also would like to say I'm from Belanki. I saw when from the heights they first were shooting at the residential areas, and then they turned around and started shooting at the checkpoint. I confirm this. That's the Ukrainian forces, but where we're shooting at Kharkiv. Why? Thank you. According to our operational information, in Donetsk, the newly arrived terrorists are being accommodated in kindergartens and schools of the Oblast Center. In the liberated areas, Ukrainian military officers are helping the locals with a peaceful life. Over the period of the last 2 days, the communities liberated from terrorists received tens of tons of bread, of grain, and other foodstuffs. Our sappers yesterday cleared mines in Vedrozhiny, not far from Artemivsk. In Slovensk, they reinstituted electric energy supplies to the kindergartens and to the schools that will be open on the 1st of September. Yesterday in Slovensk, the first after-war issue of West was issued 4,000 copies in circulation, because before the invasion, the onset of the invasion, they decided to stop their operations. Now, from Tuesday on the 29th of July, Ukrainian military officers opened the humanitarian corridor for internally displaced persons, and that is operation from 10 to 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. From Metalist to Shastya, our last day alone, that corridor was used by more than 100 cars. Now about the international situation. Ukraine, before that, hasn't yet received any response from the Russian Federation on the goal of concentration of armed forces and capabilities at the border of our state. The sanctions have become effective of the EU against the Russian Federation. According to the sanctions, there will be limitations on financial, energy, trade, commercial, military, technical, and dual-use commodities cooperation. The 19 senators of the U.S. approached Barack Obama, the president, with a request to recognize so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics as terrorist organizations to join the so-called blacklist. At this point, this is all the information I have for you, ladies and gentlemen. Please, your questions.
Liga Business Inform. Could you please tell us in more detail about the situation near Shakhtarsk as to the ambush? According to the Ministry of Defense, there are 10 killed. According to mass media, 21. There's information that 13 Marines are wounded and 11 disappeared near Shakhtarsk. Thank you for your question. During the movement of the convoy of Marines, the convoy was shot at. There's information that that was the ambush of militants who are trying to not to allow Ukrainian military to Shakhtarsk, because Shakhtarsk is a key point which will allow to divide Donetsk and Lugansk during the combat. According to the information, 10 servicemen were killed, 13 were wounded, 11. With the 11, we do not know where they are, because this combat is now switched to the phase of prolonged combat, and that is why we cannot provide any data for the last 24 hours about losses and wounded. As soon as we have the updated information, we will give it to you. STB channel. I have two questions. One about Siversky Donetsk, that the military equipment is crossing it. What type of equipment and why Ukrainian army hasn't stopped them? And about the Russian aviation, you say that they fly 10-15 kilometers to the territory of Ukraine and then go back. With what purpose? Are they just scaring our military forces. As to the Siversky Donetsk, first of all, this crossing, ferry crossing, was organized with the assistance of the mobile ferry, which is deployed within 10-15 minutes. That's very easy, and that was the section which temporarily is not controlled by Ukrainian military. And because that was at night and it was impossible to see how many units of military equipment came, we cannot give any data on that crossing. Then the second question was about aviation. According to our data, the aviation crosses the state border of Ukraine, first of all, in order to do reconnaissance and provocative actions. The aviation that crosses the border does not use any armaments or weapons, and that's characterized as provocative flights. The provocation that is just keeping Ukrainian military in tension, that's the main objective, provocation, to provoke. Could not hear. The aircrafts which are coming, they come at a very low altitude, and then first the system cannot see them. Then when they turn back and they go up, they are seen and they are fixed. But at the altitude that our border service registers them, but the border service did not have the anti-aircraft weapons. If they were moving further, then they would have been shot down by the anti-aircraft forces of Ukraine.
You mentioned that the Dutch and Australians are there already now. Do you have any initial findings from them? What kind of information do you have from them?
Thank you for your question. Basically, the results of their findings, the representatives of the specialists who are working there, I believe you mean the crash site, yeah, where they are working. Their results they're reporting to their governments. And yesterday, there was just the first day when they were allowed to go there by that corridor to the crash site. But the time was limited of their staying at the crash site. So basically, the beginning of the work, that is just the first step of joint activities of Ukrainian authorities and governments of these countries and the terrorists who allowed them, who finally listened to the international community and allowed them to enter the territory which is controlled by terrorists. We hope that this work will continue and it will show very specific results, very concrete results. Is there mobilization taking place in Donetsk region? How will men be mobilized who moved to different regions of Ukraine? During this partial mobilization, the military commissariats and the local authorities, which according to the law are responsible for mobilization, they are registering and they are doing medical examination of those guys who could be enrolled to fill in the ranks of the military units. That does not mean that everyone who was invited or called to the commissariat will go to ATO zone. Now we're just checking what is needed. The military financial specialists will not be enrolled. Now there are requirements as who's needed, which specialties are needed. And there is the military specialty. Every military has certain specialty, and they basically take young people and those who are in reserve who have some specific specialities. Every law enforcement body which needs such people, they give their requests to military commissariats, and the military commissariats, they monitor what they have, and if there is a request, then such people will be sent for training, first to the training centers, and then after this training, after preparation, they will go to the ATO zone. Are there any preferences? Is that just according to the specialty, not according from which region? First of all, it's according to what specialty is required in ATO zone. And another condition, mandatory condition, is the health. Could you please tell how do these corridors function for evacuating peaceful population? Will there be any new corridors? If you mean the corridor from Lugansk, we cannot tell you how many, but Ukrainian servicemen organized this corridor, and it's operating. We do not have any limits on numbers. We are ready to receive everyone who's coming via this corridor. There's one requirement. The vehicle that's moving along the corridor should have the white flag, or if these people are just walking, they should have a white ribbon on their hand. After that, the documents are checked and people are moved to a safe place, and all the necessary assistance is provided to them there. Could you please tell, yesterday the central mass media and today in the morning, the mass media provided some video that the battalion, which the name of which was changed, and now it's the Golden Gate Battalion. It's still sort of in the air. They are just not allowed to be in the ATO zone because they basically they had all this training and they are ready to defend their motherland, and now they are just staying in the street. And is it possible to define who personally should be responsible for that? This is a very important issue, and I have to explain something. Besides that battalion that you are mentioning, there are, I will not tell you how many battalions who are prepared to participate in ATO operation. These are the battalions of active reserve. That does not mean that they will be not needed. These are people who are in reserve, and any moment they will be assembled together and they will move to where they are needed. That does not mean that they are not needed. They are in reserve. And all people who are prepared, there's no sense to send them all to the zone, ATO zone. Many people are trying to get to training to these battalions. Just in the street, people come to me, leave their phone numbers, so that we enroll them as volunteers to the battalions, to the armed forces of Ukraine. That is the direct answer to the Kremlin, that someone forcefully sends people to ATO forces. No one is saying that you're not needed. But there's a problem here, because the video shows how the soldiers officially say they don't know what they will be doing. I know what you're talking about. There are many units who are without phone numbers. That's normal, what you've said, but this is specifically about the battalion Golden Gate, Zolote Varota, where they officially say that they do not know what to do. If they were informed, they wouldn't say that. Now, back to this issue. The soldiers cannot say when they will be called. This will be additionally announced when they are needed. They have to be ready all the time. Japanese newspaper, can you say again about this combat near Shakhtarsk? How far it is from the place, from the crash site? Will this be additional difficulty for international experts, and when such combat was taking place? Shakhtarsk is here. It's here. This is the crash site. In Shakhtarsk, as I have told you, Ukrainian military are not conducting any military actions. They were attacked. Yesterday all day, Ukrainian servicemen were keeping this day of silence for 24 hours, but they were twice shelled. First at 9 o'clock in the morning and then at 12 o'clock, and that was not from machine guns, but from Grad batteries, from Grad systems. Ukrainian military, they are fulfilling all the requirements of the President of Ukraine, international requirements, as not to conduct any combat in the crash site. If anyone is shooting there, is shelling there, these are the terrorists. Yesterday, no, there were some shots at the time when international experts were working there. So all this information was taking place yesterday. Shakhtarsk at night, approximately 1 a.m. today, night from the 31st to the 1st, basically on the 1st of August in English.
A question from NOS Television, the Netherlands. There seems to be an agreement about the train with personal belongings of the passengers of the flight. When does this train leave Torres and when will it reach Kharkov? Do you know already exactly when this is going to happen?
Thank you for.
Do you know exactly that this train, which has a car with the personal belongings from the crash site, this train is on the territory which is temporary, controlled by the terrorists. There are negotiations going on with the assistance of the Netherlands as well, so that this train moves to a safe place which is prepared by Ukrainian authorities. This could be either Kharkiv or Kiev. In any case, both in Kiev and in Kharkov, there's the place prepared for this train, so that these belongings are then transported to the place indicated by Netherlands specialists. The terrorists, as soon as they give a chance for this train to leave, we are ready to receive the train anytime. Could you please tell about the worsening of the military, of the situation near Dyakova? People say it's very bad, the situation there, and then the possibility that there might be air bombing in Artyomivsky district of Lugansk. There's some information that there was bombing there, talking about Dyakova. The same is true about the brigades which were in these sections. The decision is made to withdraw them to a safer place, to the depth of the territory of Ukraine, so that the shells do not reach their positions. The decision is made to dislocate them, but that does not mean that these sections will be left without control. We are observing them, monitoring, and if needed, the fire will be open against these convoys if they try to cross from Russia, the border of Ukraine. Talking about Lugansk, Ukrainian servicemen are not shooting at the cities, neither from Grad systems, nor from the air, nor from the tanks, nor from heavy artillery. If there is an operation to liberate the city, that is with the assistance of armored equipment. And the personnel, which is part of land armed forces, basically, so that you understand, the infantry is liberating street after street, house after house. We cannot shell at the residential areas. We are trying to preserve lives of our citizens. They're doing that. They're doing it all the time, and they're not even hiding that. Unfortunately, we cannot hear the question. I cannot tell you anything about bombing from the aircraft. If the aircraft were fixed, then we have this case with Snezhnoye, when unknown aircraft, not of the Air Force of Ukraine, bombed this settlement, Snezhnoye. That was approximately a week ago. Talking about Kadyrov group, how many of them came to the border, how close are they? We have the information that they started moving, but how many, that's classified information. They will be met. And do you have any information about the shell that exploded near the Abakumova coal mine, near the van? There are people wounded and the driver died in the hospital. I cannot tell you exactly about this situation. We have information that all residential blocks are shelled by terrorists. The Ukrainian army is not shelling. Which professions, which specialities are needed for mobilization? Should I enumerate the numbers of these specializations, so that just whatever you can say, so that we can understand it? Just look at the mobilization plan, which is in the military commissariats, and it's all specified there. We do not have these documents. We do not need them. We are not enrolling people, but I can assure you that only those who are needed will be enrolled, and they will speed up the liberation of western lands of Ukraine from terrorists, and they will do it excellently. They cannot work otherwise. But in general, which professions are needed? Military. Could you please tell, is there any information on the detention of terrorists, of the leaders of headquarters of terrorists? There is information, but those who are detained, they are actively giving evidence, and they are in the buildings of the special service. Russian mass media today gave the information that that Ukrainian forces withdrew from Savur-Mogyla. Savur-Mogyla is a strategic hill which for a long time was used by terrorists to shoot at our servicemen who were near Dyakova and who were coming from the west of Ukraine to liberate these territories. Today, and from the moment Ukrainian servicemen are there, it's under the control of Ukrainian servicemen, and that helps us keep at a distance the terrorists and protect our people who moved a little bit back so that they're not shot in their backs. Savur Mogila is controlled by Ukrainian servicemen. There was information that today the first assistant to Gubarev was killed. I'm not ready to give you exactly the information about that. Okay. In this case, thank you for your press briefing, and see you at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Колеги, наш наступний
Our next